first off, I mean, how has the virus impacted Bata globally? Which markets in particular have been the worst hit?
I mean, like everybody else in the industry, we've been hit quite significantly by this. It's from a consumer standpoint and from a supply standpoint, as you just mentioned a little bit earlier. You have the effects of the lockdown, which are direct effects, of course, when consumers don't go to stores when they are closed. But there is also the aftermath of the lockdown when it gets to macroeconomics and consumer confidence, and more importantly, the changed consumer habits, which might be structural. So it's an intensive period of learning, and it's a period where we have to exercise extraordinary levels of agility.
So in trying to be agile, how did you adapt?
So we have to adapt at different levels, right? First of all, always we start with the consumer, which is our focus fundamentally as a company. First is, how are we going to adapt to the changing shopping behaviors of consumers? How quickly and how frequently are they going to return to our stores? Number two, how do we make sure that we offer our products to them wherever and however they choose to shop, whether it is online or it is offline? Thirdly is, what kind of products are they going to seek? And how different is that from the kind of products they were seeking before the crisis? And last but not least is, what is their attitude to value for money and pricing, and how will we adjust our offering accordingly? Then you have the impact of the organization ourselves internally, up and beyond product marketing and retail. How are we as an organization going to become a much faster learning organization? And I'm pleased to say that we are in good progress and in doing so. So the way we organize ourselves, the way we make decisions, the way we get closure on decisions, and the way we execute them. So we're needing to have to exercise agility, whether it is mentally, strategically, operationally, or organizationally.
The retail sector has been pretty much hit by disruptions in the global supply chain. With economies emerging from this lockdown, how much of that global supply chain is back from your own observation?
We're having to deal at the moment with a very unprecedented. We're having a supply shock and a demand shock at the same time. I have to say, at this stage, the impact on supply chain is not negligible, but it is manageable for us because we're having a very, very broad footprint as a company, and our sourcing is extremely broad. We source from more than 12 countries around the world, and the good news is that we're not overly dependent on that, on only one particular country. And the other thing I'd like to say is that more than half of our production comes from our own factories. We have 23 factories disseminated around the world. So I would say, from a risk profile standpoint, when it gets to sourcing and supply chain, we're very well diversified from an external supplier standpoint, and we have a good risk profile when it gets to sourcing our own shoes from our own factories, as well from then external parties.
Alexis, it's Rish in Hong Kong. I just want to get a sense of the adjustments you're making fashion-wise here. Do you think fashion trends have been changed in any way, very briefly, from this pandemic?
Yeah, it's a very good question, Rishaad. It's also one of the things us and many of our competitors are grappling with. The reality is, when you look at the fashion world in general, not just footwear, but apparel as well, you've seen over the last 15 years a trend towards what we call casualization, where people are less and less formal in the workplace, in formal also social events. And that applies to the way people dress and the type of shoes that they buy. For example, the way that manifests itself in the footwear industry is that people are wearing more and more what we call athleisure type of shoes and sneakers. And this is why you see that sneakers growth over the past 10 years has been 5 times faster than what we call brown shoes. So we're seeing that manifest itself a lot with the booming athleisure and sneaker type of categories. And we have been very, very busy being prepared for that. And I'd like to say that we are making good progress and good strides in that direction. One of the good news also, if you like, about our company is that our risk profile in such instances, despite all the challenges, is relatively robust. From a product offering standpoint, we offer one of the broadest collections you can find in any country. From a price standpoint, we compete in the middle and the belly of the market. We cover all channels, whether it is own retail, franchising, wholesale, and online. And within online, we also offer what we call Bata.com service from our own platforms, as well as third-party online platforms. And lastly, we're spread over 70 countries. So our risk profile is pretty robust.
Alexis, the thing is, you know, in the subcontinent, India, Pakistan in particular, Bata is such a well-known name. How are you doing in those markets, particularly with India being your biggest one? And also very briefly, you may be the second biggest shoemaker by volume, but how do you keep your brand relevant? Because it has sort of dropped off the radar in many other parts of the world.
Yes. We're doing very well, actually, in both these countries. We have leadership positions. And during this crisis, if anything, because I don't have recent data on that front, if anything, we have widened our market share. So we are very well positioned in both these markets. And that is thanks to relentless effort in modernizing our shopping experience, modernizing and making our footwear product offering a lot more relevant. And last but not least is connecting to consumers via our marketing platforms. When it gets to, you know, how do we premiumize the brand within its mid-tier positioning, and how do we make sure that we stay relevant with consumers? The way you stay relevant with consumers is always priority A, B, and C, is making sure you offer them products which are relevant. It sounds like a platitude, but this is the most frequent mistake people can make in our category. So we are making sure that we're offering our consumers the type of product they are looking for. And that is really a combination of art and science. And then in terms of communication is how do we get insightful communication to our consumers to make sure that we resonate with them and we stay pertinent. The good news, and even if you look in particular to the subcontinent, we have data that shows that our average consumer age has dropped by 4 years over the last 5 years. So we are increasingly connecting with an emerging younger consumer base.
Alexis, you put on hold your expansion plans for India because of the coronavirus. When might those plans come into fruition? What are you looking at in terms of expansion over the next 12, 24 months?
We will resume expansion in India much earlier than in 12 months. We are very bullish on India. We are well positioned in India, and we will resume expansion as soon as the business starts going back to normal. Clearly, though, with such a disruption that this pandemic has created, the nature of the expansion and the exact execution profile of this initiative will differ and will evolve. We might choose to open stores in different types of malls, in different types of regions. We might choose to overemphasize online in some parts of the country than in other parts of the country. And that logic is actually applicable to everywhere we operate. But clearly, India is one of our largest markets, and this is where we focus on as a top priority in terms of market currently.